Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Outta Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham. Once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved in punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, this is a big one. It's a huge one. This one came out of nowhere for me. Bill Hader is on the show. You may know him from Barry. You may know him from Saturday Night Live. You may know him from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs Part 1, Part 2, and all the mini movies. You may know him from the upcoming Addams Family Part 2 as well. And he is here today to talk about punk. Never saw this coming. Huge assist from John Wurster on this. More on that in a second. But first, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer, and normally guest booker extraordinaire, but John Wurster gets the assist for this week. And he will get the message to me. I love you, Tristan, normally for what you do for this show. And thank you. You can also find me on various forms of social media. Well, Twitter and Instagram at Left4Damian. If you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is just by telling all your friends about it. Letting them all know that you enjoy this show. And then, that's how we build the network. That's how we get this thing going. You can also subscribe to this thing and rate it on your platform of choice. Thank you to everyone that does that. And there's a huge thank you to all the people that go over to patreon.com. Turned Outta Punk's Patreon, that is, and support this show over there. We do footnotes and all sorts of stuff. So thank you to the patrons of this show that keep this show going. And speaking of keeping this show going, thank you to the fine folks at Vans who came aboard a few years ago and said, Damian, do your show, just don't do it out of your own pocket. And they helped me cover the costs of this thing over here. And for that, I thank them immensely, because we would not be able to have all the fun that we do without their support. We're doing like 2 episodes a week now. 2 episodes a week. Who would have thunk? Well, approximately 2 episodes a week. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, depending on how wild the week is. But now we might be out of homeschool, so maybe we'll get back on some sort of regular schedule. Okay. There is also Flood Magazine, where you can check out right now. Flood Magazine and Turned Outta Punk have worked together a few years ago and put together this Punk as Fuck series of videos where I went around Los Angeles and hung out with various people and just talked about punk rock. Like, if you like this show, I think you'll really like these videos. There's a bunch posted, so check out floodmagazine.com, Punk as Fuck, and you will find those over there. Like, I took Steve Albini and Don Bowles to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, and fun ensues. There's a new one up with Jay Howell, who did stuff for Bob's Burgers and done tons of stuff over the years for bands and like Trash Talk and stuff like that. It's fun. It's a really awesome series, and I'm glad you finally get to see it. And also, I'm playing this band. It's this band called Fucked Up, and we have just put out the first chapter of Year of the Horse, part of our Zodiac series. This one is a long one. The first chapter is about 20 minutes long, so check that out over at Bandcamp. More information on that as it becomes available. I don't really have more to give you right now, but when I get it, you will get it. So check that out. And I think that's it for plugs. Big week for the show here. Today on the show, my new buddy, Bill Hader. Now, this all came about because John Wurster. Now, John Wurster, you may know him from the amazing work he does behind the drum kit in Superchunk or Mountain Goats, or with Bob Mould, or with any number of incredible projects that he's been involved with, like Psychotic Norman. You may know him from his comedy work. He is one of the funniest people on earth. And that's not just me saying that. I believe Bill Hader would agree with me very strongly. I think a lot of people in comedy would agree with me very strongly on this one. So you can hear him as part of the best show, and just all the stuff he's done with Tom Sharpling over the years. As part of Sharpling and Wurster. It's gotten me through tours. I wrote the liner notes for the box set. So if you really want to know my feelings on this one, I've put like 1,000 words, pen to paper, to express it. And now I got to put a little bit more words together to express how grateful I am for him supporting this podcast, because he is one of the people that every time I put up a new episode, not every time, some episodes I know he will have no interest in whatsoever, but most of the time when I put up a new episode, I'm like, I wonder what John's going to think of this one. And sure enough, he'll send me a comment or two and let me know. So when he reached out and said, I've recently reconnected with Bill Hader because he listened to your podcast and he's a fan, and I think he would be a really good guest. Would you want him to come on the show? which of course I responded to immediately. Holy shit, I had no idea. Yes, of course. And now you're going to hear the results of that. I think this is the longest Turn It a Punk ever. It might beat Robbie Brookside Part 2 by a minute or two, which would put it as the longest single episode of the show I've done. I had no idea it was going to go like this. When I sat down to do it, I was like, how's this going to go? And then we chatted for a while. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble on. This is a good one, but there are a couple notes. Like, shout out to Doom Squad. I recount the story involving Doom Squad joining Fucked Up later on in this episode, and did not give them the proper shout out. So check out some of the things Doom Squad's been up to, because they are an incredible band full of incredible people doing really creative things. Also, I guess that's it. Apart from shout out to John Wurster again, this is all thanks to you, buddy. And that is that. Okay, sit back, relax, and enjoy Bill Hader on Turned Out a Punk.
Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh man, thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan. So yeah, that's cool.
That melts my brain, because Barry is probably my favorite show. And I think I'm not alone in saying that. You probably hear that a lot, but I don't like, I once I had kids, I just had to I loved violent film, culture, TV, everything. Kids showed up. I kind of turned my back on it, but
yeah,
that show is fucking incredible.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I have the same thing. I have 3 kids, and then it's just all, it's all kid shows and things like that. And then you're just too tired to even, watch something. So when you finally do, I remember I saw a movie on Netflix called Wheelman. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's rad. And it was just one of those things where I have memories of when I was a kid, my dad watching movies like that, which are just like total, just cool, like action movies that are kind of under the radar. And I was like, what is this? This is amazing. It's a heist movie. The only thing I'll say, it's got Frank Grillo in it, and he's the wheelman for a heist, and the whole movie is inside the car.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it should be on Netflix. It's rad. It's so good.
Did you ever see that movie Doberman?
No, I haven't.
It's like Monica Bellucci and Vincent. What was her husband's name? I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, I know, Vincent Cassel.
Vincent Cassel, yeah. And so it's them, and it's like apparently based on a true story. I remember at the time reading, which I cannot believe for a second, because it is just so over the top, stylized, but just an amazing heist movie. Like, there's just something about a heist film that's just I don't know, you like, even Heat, something as indulgent as Heat is incredible.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the best. You talk about Barry. Every time we're in a sound mix on Barry, I'm like, can you make the gun sound more like Heat during that heist scene in Heat? And they're like, well, those aren't, you know why those sound that way? Because they're not treated in the sound mix. Apparently that's the way those bullets sounded in downtown LA. It was that awesome echoey sound. And I was like, that was phenomenal. And so basically what they were saying was like, yeah, basically, that's just being like, yeah, don't do your job. Like, like what was recorded on the day was much better than what they would do in a sound mix,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they were like, we'd rather not do that. Cause then like, you know what I'm saying? It's like telling I don't know what I've never, recording albums or whatever, what the difference is, but yeah, it's just basically that it would just be like, get out of the way. Like, we did it already.
No, it's 100% like what it was like for all those first wave of punk bands, like that come on the show and talk about going in the studio for the first time with all these people that were, hot off recording prog records, a year before.
Right. Yeah. What's the guy from was it Spot?
Yeah, Spot. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that thing, maybe. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah, you had a wave of engineers that came in hot on the heels of that were like, no, here's how we're going to do it, and just found the sound.
But Crimson liked it this way, and, and they're like, no.
I think it's the second Damned record that they got produced by Nick Mason from Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah, he's in the documentary about them. The Machine Gun Etiquette.
Yeah, and it's apparently like that was the reason that record. I love the way that record sounds, but the reason that record sounds so fucked up is just because it's just like culture clash in the studio.
I can't imagine that. How'd that even happen?
I guess the story was they were looking to get Syd Barrett, and
they just called the wrong guy.
To settle for the drummer. It's like, the ex-lead singer might be a hard get, guys, but who's available?
Yeah, Sid's nuts. Yes. Yeah, we can't pull Sid off the ceiling, but Nick is down.
I think it speaks to also the fact that, really in the band, in spite of all the jokes, the drummer is the backbone. Like the drummer is really the one. Like, you've been around enough bands to know that most of the time the drummer's the most solid person in that group.
Yeah.
And I include Fucked Up in that too. Jonah, our drummer, is definitely the most solid person in the band by far.
Yeah. I'm racking my brain because immediately I go to something like Motley Crue.
Of course, there's the exception that proves the rule with Motley Crue.
Like Cream, and you're like, or Blind Faith, and going like, well.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. There are some exceptions to this.
Can you imagine if they're like, here's the guy, here's Ginger Baker. He's like the quiet one.
Yeah, he's the one that's going to hold it down. He's hold it down. But I think in certain situations at that time,
totally true though. No, you're right. Yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah.
Like he recorded with Fela, right? Like, so like, imagine those shows. That was like probably a wild party. He was probably like, oh, this is my vibe.
Like, yeah, he's like, I gotta get out of here. These guys are nuts.
Well, I got to start this off the way they all start off because Bill, this is going to be amazing. I already know, and I'm not to put pressure on this because even if you don't say anything more, just me punishing you will be awesome. Yeah, so for me, maybe not for you, but I got to start this off the way they all start off, which is, Bill, how did you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across the genre?
Oh yeah, well, John Wurster's my friend, and I say he hooked this up because I said, you know what I love? I love that podcast, and I was talking to him because he mentioned that the footage of from the Bad Brain show where those two women walk out of the show, but they walk through the band. Do you remember this from American Hardcore?
Yes. Yeah.
And he was talking about that, and I was laughing really hard in my kitchen. And so I was texting with him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you should do that show," But he told me to mention that I got into music from my dad, and the first thing I ever listened to, the first record I ever listened to ever was Apostrophe by Frank Zappa. So Frank Zappa was like what I thought music was. And so I grew up listening, it was like Hot Rats and obviously there was like the radio and stuff, but like in the house it was, this instrumental Zappa stuff and proggy, like Pink Floyd and things like that. But my dad hated like Bob Dylan and Neil Young and anything popular. And so I got it. So I got into music weirdly like backwards, where it was like I didn't discover the Beatles really or the Rolling Stones until I was in my early 20s. But I bring this up because the link between these two was my dad's brother, my Uncle John, when I was 13. 12. I was 12. He was talking about punk music, and he specifically Minor Threat, their cover of Stepping Stone. And I remember him and him describing to me, it's so cool because it's it's at a, he was kind of a musician. He understood it, but I don't know the exact terms, but you know how it like comes in slowly. He was like, it's like real tinny. And you were like, what is this? And then as the drums and everything come in, it just starts to build and build and build. And it's just, it's amazing. And so I went, well, I should go find that. And I went to Starship Records and Tapes. My grandmother took me to Starship Records and Tapes, which was like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was like a head shop / record store. And so my poor grandmother was like around all these like blacklight posters, like bongs and stuff. And I was like, went to the guy and was like, hey, do you have Minor Threat, the one with the monkeys cover on it or whatever? And he was like, yeah, little boy. And took me over. And then I said, oh, there's another thing. My uncle told me to get 2 other bands, Something Brains and Something Kennedys. He goes, you mean Bad Brains and Dead Kennedys? I was like, yeah, which of their records should I get? And so he gave me, so I walked out of there with that Minor Threat record and Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death, the Dead Kennedys, and then a live Bad Brains record. They didn't have, the first record.
Well, this would all been out of print at that point too, right? Because it's
early 90s.
Yeah, like 91, right? 92,
91, 92. So this is the summer right before like Nevermind comes out. And I was of that era, that generation that it was like you had friends who were into like hippie stuff or hair bands or like everything was like Guns N' Roses or you know what I mean? And then that video came out and the next day everybody was dressed like Kurt Cobain, And but I got the it was the Youth Are Getting Restless live in Amsterdam Bad Brains record, which has a lot of that stuff on it. It actually has a killer version of Pay to Come on it. But anyway, so I just took those home and listened to them, and it is like the stereotypical thing. It was like, you're like, oh, where have you been all my life? Like, it was the linking up, and I don't know if you could relate to this. And Fred Armisen and I talk about this a lot. It was the linking up of that and getting into like monster movies. It just happened like the same summer for me. Like it was like really getting into horror movies.
Yeah.
And then punk, and those two things kind of coalescing. So then when you found when I discovered the Misfits, it was like, whoa. And so yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. But they had the Misfits have it so dialed in for like a preteen or teenage kid. Like,
yeah,
we're like superhero wrestlers that love horror movies and make super catchy songs.
Super catchy songs, and the song titles were the movies that I was finding. So I felt smart.
Yeah.
Where I was like, die, my darling. That's a movie I just watched. You know what I mean? Where Eagles Dare. I just rented that movie. It's got Clint Eastwood. Like, wow. Like, I'm a genius.
What, you had a really good video store then to be in Tulsa.
I was just it was a Blockbuster. I was just like, before this, I was always a big movie nerd, like from a very young age. Like both my parents were like, people watch a lot of television in their how, like people grew up on sitcoms and stuff. I didn't really have that. My parents would my dad would come home from the video store every day with different movies. And then he loved, they both just loved old movies. So
every day,
pardon me?
Every day. Sorry.
Yeah. Every day it would be a new, so our like time around the TV as a family was always like, and it was a real mixed bag. I remember seeing like Raising Arizona and then Moving with Richard Pryor, it was just kind of whatever was there, and he would rent it. And then as I got around this age, 12, 13, he would, or maybe a little younger, he would wake me up and my sisters and my mom would be asleep, and he would, oh, let's go into the den and let's watch, the Wild Bunch. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Or Bridge on the River Kwai and all those things. So I think I was very much dialed into that, and then I think when Nirvana and the kind of grunge scene came, it all kind of like dovetailed into each other for me. And then getting into kind of like thrashier, angrier stuff, like I wanted to play the bass, so I was into bands where like the bass was very present, like DRI, and obviously the Minutemen. I mean, the Minutemen were that was a big one. George Hurley, Mike Watt, that unit, that duo, that was kind of the thing for me.
He's like, like still like the most entertaining bass player to watch. Like obviously Bootsy Collins as well, but
yeah, no, man, when I shot It 2, I was in Toronto working on that movie, and I didn't, I hung out with the cast, but I didn't really know that many people, and the cast, some had their families out and they're all doing stuff. And so I was texting with Matt Stone from South Park, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm in Toronto for the next like 3 months, and I don't really know many people out here." And he goes, "Well, do you want to hang out with Rush?" And I was like, "Yeah, are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm really good friends with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson." I was like, "Okay." So I went and I had dinner with them, and I don't drink. It's not like I have a problem. I've never been a big drinker, but I was like, they were like, we'll have martinis. And I was like, yeah, I'll have one of those. And like within 5 minutes, I was like, the fucking guitar solo on Limelight is like fucking amazing. Like I was making such a fool of myself. I was just like, but Geddy Lee was like, hey, I just did this book on like bass players. And I was like, oh yeah, is Mike Watt in there? And he goes, actually, he is.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I go, he is? And I go, yeah. And in my head, it was like, Bill, you need to chill the fuck out. Like, dude, you are trashed. You're so nervous that you're sitting with Rush and you're getting trashed. So if you ever see the movie It 2, there's a scene where we're all in a hotel and Jessica Chastain is telling us that she has seen us all die before. And I'm leaning on a bar. And the reason I'm leaning on a bar is I am legit, I'm so hungover from, they got me completely trashed. I still to this day don't think, well, now if they ever hear this, they will know that I was like trying to play it off. And they can just like, they were fine. And I just was hammered. I was so drunk. But it was cool in my drunken state to talk to Geddy Lee about his appreciation of Mike Watt.
Yeah.
He's like, I think he's amazing. He's like, I think he's phenomenal. He's like, totally revolutionized a lot of things, and just his way of playing was so different and really interesting. And yeah, it was cool. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's like a real recognizes real kind of thing. The fact that he like gets it, you're like, oh shit. Like, but they used to play with Teenage Head back in the day, like in the early years of Rush. So I guess it makes sense that he had that ear for the underground back then, and they came from it.
I'll ask you this too. It was so fascinating to me just talking to him about the music scene and the amount of theaters in Toronto and just not knowing anything about that, and then being like, yeah, it's like the kind of folk area, like Gordon Lightfoot stuff was always like on this street, or whatever, and just like back in the 70s, like before they, when they had their original drummer and stuff, it was just very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's like a Toronto thing or if that was just rock at the time, but it was just like all real heavy.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, I love that first record. Like, I think that first record's like, like, I don't know, it must be just a 70s hard rock thing, at that time.
But there was something like weirdly it was just like the song, was it Working Man, or just that riff to it. It was just, it's very metally. I don't know how to, I'm bad at explaining these things, but it's just like, yeah, it was like almost Black Sabbath ish. I don't know. So I was really surprised when I listened to that first record before Neil Peart came in. I was like, whoa, this is cool.
Yeah, like I think there's like Toronto at the time also was super backwoodsy. There's this great book called Treat Me Like Dirt about the early Toronto punk scene. They talk, Rush comes up obviously playing with these bands back then. And it feels like, as much as it's kind of like, relatively speaking, a cosmopolitan kind of place, like at that time, everything was shut on Sundays, and like, it was Toronto the good and very, like a, working class Protestant kind of town.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know, man. I love that stuff. Even working at SNL, talking to Lauren Michaels and talking to Martin Short and people like that, and just talking about the city. And I just am always amazed, like that in Montreal too, just the amount of theaters. I don't know. That just kind of boggles my mind, just growing up in Oklahoma. And it was like, there was Kane's Ballroom and there, there's a place called the Icon. And it was like, that was kind of it, Yeah. I was like, you can have your own band and just kind of have like, I mean, is that kind of how it is? You just would have your residency in one theater, or you can kind of bounce around, or
we were playing, when we were coming up, it was like dives, we were playing, like we would play this place, Q Bar, and like a lot of restaurants. Cause finding all ages spaces in Toronto was always difficult. And I
see. Yeah.
And it's also, we've got a fairly, it's broken down a little bit now, and there's a lot more DIY stuff, but it's a fairly music industry town here. Mm-hmm. And getting into some of these places was hard. Like, a lot of venues would be like, well, you have to play our Battle of the Bands night, and then you got to do this thing and do that thing. And so, playing in a punk band, you're like, there's no way we're doing any of that.
Yeah, no.
Like, we literally played shows anywhere and everywhere. They would let us, like garbage dumps. If there was a garbage dump that would have let us put on a show and it had power, we would have definitely done a show there.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in a sketch group before I got Saturday Night Live, we played a backyard in Van Nuys.
Yeah, like I read that. Like, was like that, like the venues you guys would mainly do was backyard stuff?
We just did a backyard in Van Nuys. It was Matt Offerman, one of the guys in the group. It was his backyard, and they made like a screen with a bed sheet and a wooden frame so we could project videos onto it, and people just brought their own beer and food and stuff, and it was just like, it was like a huge party. But we just do sketch shows in this backyard. And then we finally, I think we played like the UCB theater in LA, like it opened basically the week that I found out I got Saturday Night Live. So our last show as a group was at the new UCB theater, and then I moved to New York the next day.
That's wild. It's funny when you talked about that Rush thing. I've only ever been to one Saturday Night Live party, and I'm the same way as you. I don't drink, but I got so nervous at that party that I ended up drinking and got a little drunk. And the whole time in my head, I was like, dial it back, Damian. Dial it back. Come on, buddy. People don't need this. So,
I like that version of punishing. I think that's true. It's like, that's what I do when I meet. Yeah, it's like, you sit with any of these guys and, oh man, I remember just sitting with Martin Short and being like, can I talk to you about SCTV? And he's the nicest human being on the planet. You could talk to him about anything, but all of the SCTV people they're like, just, I've been very lucky. I get to, meet a lot of them, and they're just the nicest people in the world. But like Kevin McDonald from Kids in the Hall came and guest wrote on SNL when I was there, and like I was losing my mind. It was that all week. I was just like, dude, be cool. Be cool. Because Andy Samberg's really cool. Like, he can be very cool. I'm like, oh, hey, like, what? I think that's why, like, he's he's just very chill, even though I know, like, oh, he's a big fan of that person. Where I'm like, Steven Spielberg came, and I'm just, it's that term, punishing them. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, how did you do the planes in 1941? Are those all models? how did you get the waves and the model to do the, and he's like, oh, it's Alka-Seltzer. That's how we got the waves in that model, because it's this model thing in 1941, and there's these waves going in, and they break, and I'm like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it's Alka-Seltzer. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. And they're like, Bill, you need to get out of his dressing room,
I like that, but that's, to me, is like, I don't know, there's like a different kind of fan, and like, no diss on Andy Samberg or people like that have that kind of cool aloofness to it, but like, it's the same type of person that got into horror movies and punk rock, and you had to be inside it. You had to understand it from the inside,
I should say this, Andy, I just want to make sure he's not aloof. He just knows how to like get that information, but he knows to get that as you become friendly with the person. He knows not to lead with that. He's like, hey man, thank you for coming, man. That's so awesome. You're here and you're going to be in a Laser Cats. That's awesome. Where I'm, immediately, how do I see Firelight? Your first film you made. Yeah, I know about it. How'd you do the thing in Sugarland Express? With like, he does a dolly shot on a car in Sugarland Express, and I had never figured out how they did it. And then he was like, we hooked a dolly to the car, and I was like, that's awesome. It was the most obvious thing. I was like, that's rad. All right. And they're like, Bill, dude, chill the fuck out.
But there's just, I don't know, there's something about that. Like, I will hang out with someone who's obsessed with anything, because I could, like, even if it's fucking Pokemon cards, like, because like that kind of level of, I don't know, whatever mental defectiveness that I also seem to suffer from, like, those are my people. I relate to that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's like, and also I should also say, because Steven Spielberg was really cool. He wasn't like, dude, get out of here. He was like, oh, it was really neat. We did it this way. Like, he was very nice. But there's other people I won't mention that, and no, nothing against them. We're like, dude, like, I'm about to go on live television. Can you not ask me about something I did 30 years ago? Whereas he was like, oh my God, he would answer all your questions. He was so sweet.
Well, because those guys were that way too, right? Like, they were nerds about this shit as well.
Yeah, totally. No, I love your term, punishing them. Like, I love that term. I'm using that for now on, because that's totally what it is.
It is. It's kind of like, and it's funny because now that Phoebe Bridgers put out that record Punisher, and I imagine as a female artist, it's probably like a woman artist has to deal with things very differently than a male artist does. And I'm not talking about that kind of punishment that she would endure, but like the type of punishment that we're talking about, where someone just wants to like just nerd the fuck out about something. Yeah. That's the reason I have this podcast, because there's no other way to do this.
Yeah, totally. I love that record, by the way. My that's the crazy thing, man. I don't know how old your kids are, but my oldest is 11, and now it's like she listens to that record, like she loves it, she's like, this is beautiful, and
I want to get my kid into that. Then
reads interviews with her online, and then comes down and is like, Dad, who's Elliott Smith? And I was like, how do you know about Elliott Smith? And she's like, well, Phoebe Bridgers, that's her. She talked about Elliott Smith. I was like, oh yeah, I could put some of that on. It's good, or whatever. It's cool. It gets cool in the children.
I've got an 11-year-old too, and every time he brings me a musician, he's like, hey Dad, check out this guy. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't listen to this again. Like, this makes Anal Cunt sound tame by comparison. Like, where did you find this? Like, this film. Like,
yeah, that's a nightmare.
It's like, YouTube is like, I've liked YouTube, and all I saw in it, I just thought people put up videos of old concerts, because that's all I ever searched for on YouTube.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. It's like, this is Devo the night they first played, whatever. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, and now my kids are telling me like, oh no, Dad, there's like a whole, like, they're showing me videos on YouTube with these people that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a whole other reality than I knew.
I know. It's really freaky, man. it's very freaky.
I used to honestly think, like, as I was listening to like a black metal record, reading some like super weird fanzine and like watching, like El Topo or something, like there's nothing my kids can do that will ever freak me out. Like I am really at the last, and then look at us.
Yeah. No, I'm telling you, man, it happens so fast too, where you're just like, I'm old.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an old asshole now.
I've done it across that line.
I'm like, come on, that's shit, and it's like, Dad,
Well, it's like what? Oh, go on, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
It's like sometimes
like really nice, like polite, anxious guys. So there's gonna be a lot of like, no, you're gonna have to edit out all the like, no, you go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
I do that a lot. Don't worry. I stumble onto people all the time, and I'm like,
me too.
That won't survive the edit.
Yeah.
But it's like funny. I'll put on something for my kids. Like, you want to hear some real mind blowing shit? Check out this, and I'll put something on, and I'll be like, oh, this would be like my dad being like, you want to hear some real mind blowing shit, and putting on like Foghat.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you're like, uh-huh.
Yeah. Like, thanks, Dad. Like,
sweet.
I don't want any more of your power violence. Please go away.
Yeah. No, it's so funny, man. And but you can't, you have to let them have their thing, because you don't want to, I just very gently be like, what are you watching? Oh, I'm watching, Fritz Lang's Dr. Mabuse, which is 4 hours long and made in a 4-hour-long German silent movie. Do you want to watch it with me? No? All right. You're lost.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how you get control of the TV. I'm always
they're like, get out of here.
Yeah.
They do like Buster Keaton, though. They do like Buster Keaton movies, which is cool. But again, you got to also chill out and watch what they want to watch. And then sometimes there's something on there that I'm like, oh, this is really good. Or weirdly, I'll see a performance and I'm like, oh, that actor is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that?
Mm-hmm. No, I've gotten into like a lot of shows that I probably like, Young Justice, like all these TV shows that I probably wouldn't have watched. And I'm like, this is actually really well written.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing how hot you keep it. Well, actually, going back, what was the first concert you went to?
Oh man, like punk concert or
just anything?
First concert I went to was Huey Lewis and the News.
That's a pretty good concert for the first one.
And then when they did Heart of Rock and Roll, they say Tulsa in that song, and we were like, I just remember I thought I was going to explode because all night we're like, if they play Heart of Rock and Roll, they're going to say our city, and my head's going to explode. And you could tell, like, I feel like everybody, because Tulsa is just, everybody in the amphitheater was that way. So the minute Heart of Rock and Roll started, everybody was like, ah! It was like, do, 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 do. And I was like, oh my God. And then when they said Tulsa in the song, the house lights went up. Like the house lights went on. I was like, Tulsa! And everybody went crazy. And I was maybe 8 years old. And I just thought it was the coolest thing of all time.
I like the fact that you thought there was a chance that he might not play Heart of Rock and Roll.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Yeah, you're like, what if they don't play it? Yeah, and I look and I'm like, well, what else would they play?
It's like I saw back at Lollapalooza, and the whole thing was I read in advance that he wasn't going to play Loser. And it was like, and then at the end he pulled it out. He's like, I don't normally play this one, but here's Loser. And the crowd went nuts. And I was just thinking, there must be a lot of deflated rooms on those tours.
Exactly.
You didn't play the one song. You didn't play Loser.
How did that happen?
I didn't forget that.
This is insane. Yeah. It's like, I don't know if Pink Floyd could ever do a show after 1979 and not play Comfortably Numb. Like,
yeah.
It's like people would be like, what's going on, guys?
I saw David Bowie once, and he bought out like one of those like pianos that you play with your mouth. And he started doing Space Oddity, and the crowd like erupts, and he's like, nah. I'm just fucking with you.
Yeah. Ground Control too. Now my next song is
The other move that bands do now is that they'll play all their whole old hits, but they'll do it as a medley. Just get them all the way so you can fill the set with a new record.
Oh my God. I've been to those where it's really sad, like a festival, and it's like a band and they're playing all the new stuff and no one cares. And then they just go like, all right, they start playing the old stuff and everybody goes ape shit.
Yeah. It's when you're in the band, I can totally get why people, why bands get bummed out that people only want to hear their old stuff. But at the same time, it's kind of the fucking job.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. It's kind of like, well, don't do this then, bro.
Yeah, like someone's paying you money to go up on stage and do something that most people just do for free as a hobby. Like, you really kind of, the least you can do is play the one song they really want to hear. Yeah. I say this now, but we're not going to do it on the next tour. We're just going to all do only new record stuff.
Yeah, it's weird, man. I'm always trying to just, like, I don't know what the comedy version of that. Like, I get asked to do always like a lot of impressions and stuff, but I mean, it's not the same thing, obviously, as
like you probably get it. Like, I've been at comedy shows where people yell out. Like, I've been I saw David Cross do stand up and people were yelling at Mr. Show sketches. Like,
that's hilarious.
He's going to do a whole sketch as one person.
Yeah,
on
how
stage.
does that work? Yeah, like pre-call-in talk show. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah, I always get people yell out like Stefan or something like that, and I'm just like, what? Oh, thank you. And then they stare at me, and I'm like, wait, do you want me to do it? I'm not gonna do it. We're at the grocery store. Like, I can't. It's like, please.
Yeah, that no one would ever come up to me and ask me to yell in their face at a grocery store. So I definitely, no matter. Can you ask me about punk in this grocery store right now, please? Well, it would have to be a very specialized grocery store for that to happen. But is it true Stefan's based on like Party Monster and that whole scene? A little bit.
Stefan is really, John Mulaney. That's the guy that, he kind of, it was an email he got from a guy. That was in that scene. And the guy was like, it was an email that was like, come to this club. It has everything. And one of the things in the email was the club had rooms full of broken glass. I think was in the email. Awesome. And we were like, what? And then I had a barista at Joe's Coffee in New York that I would just kind of talk to and draw out, and and he kind of had that, and John was doing his thing in a similar kind of voice, so it was like it just had a big Venn diagram for a character. And,
have you ever seen that Party Monster documentary?
No, I've seen, he's out, right? That guy is.
I think he passed away recently. I think he died during COVID.
Oh, really? Oh, no. Oh, wow.
I think it might have been a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, really recently. Yeah, like, so that's, I will definitely double check.
Oh, wow. But yeah, that's such a fascinating, really dark story.
Mm-hmm.
With they rolled a guy up in a rug and all this stuff and beat him with a hammer. And yeah, I mean, that's the other thing I love is true crime. So it's like, that's a whole other thing where during this pandemic, the amount of true crime text threads with friends being like, have you seen this? Guys, you got to watch this episode of this, and then I watch it and like, I have terrible anxiety and I'm like, why am I watching this?
Yeah.
Now I'm anxious. I was fine before I turned this on.
My wife's always like, you got to watch, like, she's super into true crime stuff. And I'm like, this will give me nightmares. I'm going to have nightmares now.
Yeah, no, I get that way too. So now it's like, I try to find a happy medium of like cult documentaries. There's one called The Source Family that's pretty funny. And
is that the Source? They were like music stuff too, right?
Yeah. They put out records. Yeah. Like Billy Corgan's in the documentary talking about how great the records are, but they had a health food store that is in the movie Annie Hall when they're at like a a health food place in Annie Hall, and another movie called Alex in Wonderland with a Paul Mazursky movie. But it was like this health food place, and then it was like a sex cult. But the ending of that movie is truly one of the most bizarre things. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but the end of that story is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in a documentary.
Oh wow, I got it. Yeah, I'll
you gotta
watch
check
that.
it out. Source Family. I'm just like watching it, going like, this is so strange. And then it came into the end, and I was like, what the fuck? And my friend who had seen it, he's like, have you gotten to the end yet? Have you gotten to the end yet? He's like, just text me when you get to the end.
No, it definitely is. I don't know. There's just something about those cults, like especially the '70s ones that have those weird music ties. Like, do you know the Process Church?
No. What's that?
It's the Process. If you look at the first Parliament Funkadelic record, there's all this stuff about the Process Church in it. And apparently, to this day, if you ask George Clinton about it, he just shuts down the conversation immediately. Like, he's like, I don't want to talk about this. But they were a British. They believe that Jesus and Satan were one and the same, like the lamb and the goat were one, and that it was like this guy who was, very, handsome, like super blonde hair, like a blonde beard, and he had these huge Doberman dogs, I believe, that would walk around the compound with them. And they had an office in Toronto. They had, obviously, I think one in Detroit, and they had like a few spread out around America. And then, it just disappears. But my dad drew a cartoon of the leader of this cult, and they threatened to kill him, and that's why he moved to Canada.
What?
Well, I know they were like threatening to kill him, but they were out there looking for him, apparently.
Wow.
And it has a Manson tie too. Like some guy that was involved in the Process Church was somehow also involved in the Manson family. And like, this is another one that needs a documentary because clearly,
how is that not a documentary? That's like, that is rife for that kind of stuff. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, yeah, all that stuff, the Jim Jones stuff, all that. I mean, it's dark and everything, but I find it really fascinating.
Yeah. And it's very, I don't know, I find it very analogous for what's people's like, cult-like views of political, like, despots now, like all over the world.
Completely.
Like it's very similar kind of like vibes.
Yeah. It's like people in their own curated reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just not, they're not in their own world. They're in their own little weird world right now. And it's really scary, man. Yeah. I think that's why you kind of watch those things. It's not, it's almost so you can, for me as somebody who really does, people go like, oh, you're anxious or whatever, but you're like, oh no, I actually suffer from like an anxiety disorder. I feel like I watch those things so I can identify the people to stay away from. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Like, oh, okay, that's a personality type. All right, check. Okay, when it's too good to be true, it's because the person's a murderer. It's like, don't go to a church with a guy who says he can float. Okay, got it.
I was watching the Nexium one recently, and that the head of that cult, I'm like, I think I'd be immune to this cult. Like, there's no way I'd be swayed into believing this dude, the thing he's selling. If I had to sit and watch a dude play volleyball for like 4 hours, I'm out.
How much? I just don't understand. He should have just not had a cult and just sold his own line of volleyball wear, and he would have been fine. Like, can you imagine walking into a department store with a little Rainier mannequin with the long hair and all that volleyball gear on? He would make so much more money than like being in that awful cult where you hurt all those people.
Yeah. That's the other thing is like you laugh at it, it's entertainment, and then you're like, oh shit, it's real.
Oh no, he's super crazy and awful. And I mean, that's the weird thing about it is you just go, I can't believe this is happening.
Back to more pleasant stuff. We don't have to talk about all this.
Oh no, this is my whole life. By the way, this is like I think because of the pandemic, so many of these conversations end up this way.
Yeah.
Like anyway, so blah blah blah, and everything's really bad. Anyway,
everyone's like a 90s zine now. Everything's like Film Thread or something.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, anyway, I shouldn't go to bed right now, but I'm going to.
Did you like going back to getting into stuff? Did you play in a band? You mentioned playing bass.
No, I played bass, and then I had a friend named Clint who played drums, but not really. I had a bass that I would play around on, and I would try to play along with songs in my room. But I will say, like, the pull of movies and writing stuff was greater than that, and so it kind of gathered dust in my room. And then it really wasn't until I was doing SNL and Fred Armisen wrote that punk band sketch at the wedding with Dave Grohl in it, and he was like, well, it's punk, I'm sure you could play along with it. And then I think Fred was just like, wow, Bill, you're playing along. Bill, you're good. He was so sweet about it. And he's like, you're really good. And so then when we did Documentary Now, we did 2 band, Blue Jean Committee and Test Pattern. And I'm playing in all those. But I'm very much like the, whatever Paul Simonon, like, he has to show me what to do. And
But you look good doing it, just like Paul, right?
Yeah. I know. I do not look as cool as Paul. And he actually, got way better. But there is all those stories on that first record where it was all like written out right on the neck of his bass or whatever. Like, he didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely. It seems like the punk bass player position was fairly nebulous in the beginning as well. Like, it's like, oh, do you look good like Sid, or do you look good like Paul?
Just look cool, Yeah. And it wasn't, I think that's why Mike Watt, going back to that, that's why he was so amazing, because it was like, whoa, this is something else, just listening to a lot of punk, and then you listen to your first Minutemen record, you just go, wait a minute, this, like, the bass is like really, driving it, in a way that the other stuff isn't. I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah, same even the Bad Brains too. Like, it's like, like there's just something about when punk came not back to America, but like when it was like, that sort of second wave of bands in America, it was all like, okay, well, we're also really good players. Like, most of those SST bands, like, all those people could play.
Yeah. I mean, Bad Brains, that's kind of the one. That's the one I think I keep going back to, and that's the one I feel like everyone pretty much agrees on.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I talk to anybody from the era of punk that I was really into, which is the kind of, late 70s, early 80s, the heyday, everyone's like, well, Bad Brains, it just seems like it's even, there's no question.
They're like an uncoverable band, right? Like, they're just like, to this day, like, anytime you hear someone try and do a Bad Brains cover, it's like, good luck with that.
Good luck with that. It really is like just that. I had that VHS tape of Bad Brains at CBGB's in '82, and the opening of that, where they start with Big Takeover, like, that is like, if you could just solidify like what punk rock is, it's like that.
Yeah, no, 100%.
It starts, and those punks get up on the stage and they start slam dancing. That one giant dude with a mohawk, he weighs like 400 pounds, and he has like he just looks so scary, and they're just so chill, and HR's like, fully, in it,
yeah.
And it gives me chills just thinking about it. I watch that all the time. That was one of those things, like, when YouTube came out, I'm like, this is why YouTube exists, because I lost this VHS, and now the whole thing's on YouTube, and I can watch it anytime I want, and it makes me really happy.
Yeah, no, Bad Brains 82 and that Bad Brains 79, when they're all in the suits, are like, those are my favorite videos on YouTube.
Amazing. They're just so cool.
Yeah.
And then they didn't really, I'm like, how do you want to do that?
Yeah, I know. It's like, and
how did you know how fucking cool that is? Like, because that documentary, the more recent one that came out, they're just, they're just really cool guys, and you're like, do you realize how innovative that was? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it was just funny to me that they were like trying to do something else, and then they heard the Dead Boys and other things, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll do that, and then just were the best thing ever.
Yeah, no, that's why, like, when I show my 11-year-old those videos on YouTube and he wants to show me Aaron Paul videos, I'm like, dude, look at this guy. This is way
no,
cool.
no, we're not doing this.
It's they are, you know, like you're saying, like the band that everyone agrees on because they were so good. Like they changed music forever.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, because it's funny, like when you actually go through it, because I should say, you know, I was into punk and I had like the consistent bands like Minutemen and Bad Brains and things like that. But then you kind of get into other music, and, you know, I like all kinds of music, and but it wasn't when I got on SNL and was hanging out with Fred and he was talking about punk that I really took more of a deep dive into it, and you know, started just discovering other things like, you know, like the Saints and UK Subs, and, you know, like just stuff like that, the Ruts and things like that, the Damned. I mean, Fred's such a massive fan of the Damned, and so really going down like the rabbit hole of that. And then when we shot the Test Pattern documentary, now I had Fred and John there, and the great Hal Wilner was there as well, and so just picking their brains about music. So I'm definitely one of those people. I'm always on the hunt for a new scene, and, you know, I mean, John just this week turned me on to the Saints. He's like, you know, there's a documentary of them on YouTube. I was like, are you what? You know, and so, you know, getting to watch that and how they broke up, and then that's what I love about YouTube is then off to the side, it's like, you know, Stiff Little Fingers audio documentary. It's like, what? You know, and then it's like, now I'm on the Undertones documentary. I'm like, oh my God, hosted by John Peel. Oh my God, this is awesome. But when you listen to all that, and so you take the deep dive, for me at least, which I'm, you know, this is all stuff, you know, none of it's news to you, you know, obviously, but like you go through it. And then when you hit Bad Brains, it's just like, fuck, I can't imagine being a punk fan at that time.
Yeah.
And then going, like, what is this? You know, like it just blows the roof off the place. When I first moved to LA, I mean, I remember being at the Bright Spot diner, and I was outside with a friend talking, and there's this guy walking around in a white suit, and I go, God, that looks like HR from the Bad Brains. And it was. And it was just like, holy shit, is he home? Like, what is going on? You know, and it was, and he was just bumming around Silver Lake. And I was like, whoa. But that was, you know, a while back.
There's even like, there's that band Terror that they played. I think they were playing even in DC one time, actually, weirdly, but it might have been LA. But there was a guy out front with a guitar, like, you know, just on the street hanging out, and they're like, holy shit, that's HR. And they went up to him, they're like, yo, if you want to come to the show tonight, like, the door's open, like, you're a legend, like, we wouldn't be doing this without you, please no. And they came back, and he was hanging out on the side of the stage, and when they did their intro, he went out with the acoustic guitar and like rocked out with them like it was the 82 video or something. and then just disappeared and just bolted. And it was it's like he just like, you know, like we're talking about like one of the all-time greatest front people in music to ever pick up a microphone.
Ever. I don't care. Like, I'm so jealous when I hear those stories of like Henry Rollins and HR literally jumping on him and just screaming at him going like, ah! You know, you just would be like, that's amazing, you know? And they were, you know, one of the bands that got me into it, you know, when I was 12, you know, like that live record, it was just like, wow, you know, this is so amazing.
So who were the local bands in Tulsa? Like, was there like much of a local scene at that point?
Well, there was, but I did not know about it. There was one, especially in the 80s, and there's actually a documentary about it. Oil City Confidential, is that what it's called? Oil City. punk doc. I just watched it. And I got to be honest, I did Oil City Confidential. No. That's a Julian Temple one. What am I talking about? Wait, Tulsa one. That's the one about the pub rock band.
I got to see that too. I love Filth and Fury is one of my favorite music documentaries ever.
Yeah, I just watched his one that he did on Shane McGowan.
Oh, is it good? Like I haven't seen that. I wasn't as much a fan of the Strummer one.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, okay, Oil Capital Underground.
Oil Capital Underground. Okay, I'm writing that down.
So that's on Amazon Prime, and it's about so there's a documentary, Oil Capital Underground, and it's about the Tulsa punk scene. And I had no clue that was going on, but some of it is before, I mean, my time, because I mean, it really is, it like starts in the late 70s and, and Kane's Ballroom is famous because one of the few places that the Sex Pistols played when they came to America. And there's a giant hole in the wall that's there to this day, where Sid Vicious smashed his guitar his bass into the wall. So growing up, you would go see, I remember seeing like They Might Be Giants at Kane's Ballroom or something, and there was this giant hole in the wall with this like little plaque next to it going Sid Vicious smashed his bass into here, and it was like, whoa. But I would go see, bands like, I would go see Beck or whoever, in like the 90s at Kane's Ballroom. And I think I saw Frank Black there and, people like that. But I mean, that documentary, I watched that and I go, how did I not know this was going on? It was all these like, it was really cool bands. I mean, Fred and I talk about wanting to do a documentary now about punk documentaries, how all those documentaries, they all look like they're being, the people being interviewed are all in the exact same apartment. It's like their LPs are behind them and there's like a lot of horror stuff or like stuffed animals or like, things like that. We know that because that's like our apartments. So, but, scene documentaries are just like really taking off. It seems like there's one on the Chicago scene, and that one's kind of cool. I love it, when you hear about, cause my dad grew up in Chicago and he had had a bunch of brothers. He had like six or seven brothers and clearly super close. I'm like, wait, is there 6 or 7 of them? I don't remember. But one was into punk, but then, the other one, I remember him saying like, oh yeah, your Uncle John's a Devo.
Well, that was the insult, right?
Yeah, that was the insult. That was like, yeah, your Uncle John's a Devo. And I was like, what a weird insult. I'd be like, you think? Really? You think it could be a Devo? Wow, thanks. I would be so like, well, thank you. But yeah, man, how I like those scene documentaries. The Chicago one's cool. It's got a bunch of like, about like Naked Raygun and, Steve Albini's in it, of course.
Well, I think that's the, like you're saying, like there's all these scenes, like it was really an explosion. Like it's like one of the times in music, like, you see it a bit with, you definitely see it a lot, with the garage rock explosion after the British invasion stuff happens.
Yeah.
But where you add like a bunch of youth being told like music made by kids is fucking awesome. Go and do it.
Yeah.
I think we're in it now too.
Yeah.
Again, like it's obviously different now, but I feel like it's the same sort of wave where you have like a bunch of young kids just empowered to make music by the technology or,
it's the same with movies too. It's like, you just see now you don't have like an excuse.
Yeah.
You used to be like, I just don't have the money to do things. It's like, nah, if you have a phone, you can make stuff now. And, and that's what's so cool, again, like you watch your kids make stuff and you're like, whoa, your video has like like sound and it's and weird transitions and all this stuff. Like, this is awesome, And I was like, oh, I did an iMovie on my iPad. I'm like, oh my God, if I wanted to do that, it would have cost like $3,000. I mean,
we had to go. We had to go on a virtual tour for my eldest because he's going to like middle school next year tonight. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching the video that one of the students made, and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could make a video that looked this good myself.
How did you do this? Yeah, this guy's amazing. And then you're going, well, geez, what are they going to be like, 10, 15, 20 years from now? What kind of filmmakers, musicians who grew up, doing this stuff, Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting. I think it's cool. But yeah, man, I wasn't, to go back to your band question, I was never in a band, like a band, but the closest I ever got was doing those things with Fred. And we actually got to play like on TV shows, like Seth Meyers' show. And then we actually played like some, festivals.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. I got to like, live a little fantasy of, getting to play music out, in front of an audience. It's like it's amazing. It was so cool. You guys have a cool job.
Sometimes it's cool.
Wait, do you ever have a thing at punk shows? I'm always curious about this because it is like so intense, especially your guys' stuff is like amazing and it's so intense, especially, you on stage and everything. Have you ever gone out and are you assessing what the crowd's like, and is there any danger or hostility, and is that affecting anything? Are you like regulating it and stuff while you're performing? I always think about that with people like yourself or Keith Morris or Henry Rollins or any of those guys who just seem to be, you guys just go off, and it's amazing.
I know I did. Well, first of all, thank you. That's very flattering to hear you say that. And I think I think that's part of the job, right? To go out there, and you're kind of, as much as you're there to perform, you're also there to kind of keep an eye on what's happening, and not that you see everything, and shit can definitely happen that you don't see. But yeah, you're like trying to make sure that people aren't being fucking assholes. And and sometimes I fucked up. I got beaten up really bad in the middle of our show in Liverpool one time.
Wow.
Really? And actually, while the Flaming Lips were playing on the main stage, we were on the second stage. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But this group of dudes were harassing this couple, and I could see them. And so I hopped off the stage and I went over because I a bunch of people in the crowd were kind of like trying to get these guys to leave this couple alone. And, I'm like, get the fuck out. We're not playing for you. And so we kind of like do this human wall. And we're like trying to force these guys out. And one of them just runs and punches this guy and the girl in the face, cocks him. And I don't know shit about fighting, but I do watch a lot of pro wrestling. And so first thing I do is run and hit a spear on him. Like I just run full speed and just spear him into the barricade. And so he goes down on the ground. So I'm on top of him, and another guy kicks me. And so I start trying to put him into like a Kurt Angle style ankle lock from wrestling. And since I know some wrestlers now, and they're like, yeah, that's not like a real thing that works. And I'm like, shit. Yeah.
Abort.
And then, so by that point, I'm trying to get them in this move as I'm sitting on top of this other dude. All their friends come in, and it's just like, it's only about a minute or two, but it's a good solid minute or two of people trying to stomp on my head. So I've covered up.
Oh my God.
And they're not able to ever land like a clean blow, but they're like hitting my jaw. Like I've got boot prints on my face. And then finally it gets broken up in security. Like all the people like grab these guys, and it's done. And I come up, I'm covered in blood. My band comes over, and I'm like, okay, let's finish the fucking set. They're like, I don't think this is a good idea. And I'm like, let's finish the fucking set. And so we finished the set, and we had also, for some reason, expanded for this tour, a 9-piece lineup where we had these 3 other young kids that had this other band that were like singing backups and playing keyboards. But I come back on stage covered in blood, and they're crying. We are sobbing, trying to sing backups for the rest of the set. And then I had a concussion for the rest of the tour. My head was ringing for the rest of the tour.
Oh no.
It was fucking brutal.
Dude.
It was so bad.
Sorry, man. That's so funny.
No, it's okay. I'm like far enough away from it now that I'm like, I 1,000% see every humorous moment in it. But at the time, it was like, because it was, I had never expected that to happen. Because like you're saying, like, you know, people do this shit all the time. And like, you know, like I'm a superhero on the stage and like, what's going to happen to me? And then all of a sudden it was like, no, I am fucking mortal.
Yeah, man. But that's why I'm always curious about those shows. Like, when I watch like Decline of Western Civilization or something, I'm like, how do they know? Like, do you ever just in the middle of it, you know, you're doing a song and just going like, all right, that guy's crazy, so I'm not going to go over there.
Yeah, that definitely happens.
You know,
there's been, I think every show I try and just like finish the show by walking out into the crowd and saying hi to people.
Mm-hmm.
And one time we were playing Fuji Rock in Japan, and while I was like passing the mic to people in the crowd, people were sticking me with cigarettes. Like, I don't know if it was deliberate, but I was getting jabbed with cigarettes. So that night I'm like, I'm not going to go in the crowd. I'm just going to walk backstage.
You know what? I'm going to hang out back here. Thanks.
Yeah. And actually, one night we played with the Arcade Fire on the last night of the German tour. A woman in the front row was screaming, "Make them stop. Oh God, make them stop." And no one clapped after any songs. And I said, you know what? Probably just go straight backstage tonight.
Oh, we would have that at Saturday Night Live.
Really?
Time. Yeah, where you would do a sketch and it would be like, no one likes this. We did a sketch. We and Will Forte did a sketch with Josh Brolin that it was called Fart Face. I know a sketch called Fart Face is crazy that it didn't play well. But we were three guys in a like old grizzled guys in a like businessmen. Because I think Will and I always found that funny, those kind of characters funny. I always found it funny because it was very Kids in the Hall type characters. They're always these kind of like very uptight business guys. And they were called Jerry and Carl. Hello, Jerry. Hello, Carl. And it was all very straight, and it was about business meetings or whatever. And then Josh Brolin comes in, and his name was Jim Deaver, mm-hmm. And he was also a businessman. And then we said, "Word on the street is you're a fart face," and it's like, "I'm not a fart face. I don't know who told you that." And it was like, the joke was how stupid and asinine it was, but they were taking it very seriously. And then the sketch heightens to the point where Josh Brolin starts crying. And then we threaten to tell everybody that he cried in our office and he kills himself. So that was the sketch. Oh my God. We did it at Dress, and it was like we were doing a Pinter play. Like I could hear my footsteps on the ground. Like no one was making a sound while we were doing it. Like people hated it the minute it started. People were like, "Fuck you, fuck this sketch." Like, and also it was the most watched episode in SNL history up to that point because Sarah Palin was on the show. Mm. So we do it at Dress and we go, well, that's over with. We're never going to do that. You know, we tried. And then we come in, and not only is it in the show, but Lorne Michaels moved it up. And we were like, why? And he just found it really funny about how stupid it was, but how committed everybody was. Because it gets really like dire, like we're all screaming at each other. And
it sounds like super funny. Like it sounds like it'd be an amazing audio thing because it's so subtle.
It's very strange. It's not great. But my favorite part of this is we go, here are my three favorite things. Was Lorne Michaels gives notes, and his note was, "I saw a boom shadow and fart face," which made us all laugh really hard because it was just like, this is so dumb that you're treating it with such respect. To say like, we had a boom shadow and fart face, and it's like, you can have a billion boom shadows and fart face. It doesn't matter. It's a shitty sketch. And then when we went out there, so we're dressed as these characters, and we're watching as Sarah Palin and Amy Poehler rap on Update, and the audience is losing their minds. They're going crazy. And then we're up. And it was like the end of the Wild Bunch. It was like, we're all about to die. It was just like, and we got there and the audience is like laughing. Can you believe that Sarah Palin was just rapping and everything? And Josh Brolin looked up at the audience and he looked at me and Forte and he goes, well, fellas, let's shut these fuckers up. And it was like, yeah, like, here we go. And it played somehow worst on air. Like the audience was actually making noises like, no, you know, like people hated it. And then one of the reviews that someone sent me was, I think in the New York Times or something, they said there was a sketch called Fart Face. It seemed that Bill Hader and Will Forte had one sketch planned, and then they looked in the garbage and saw a sketch called Fart Face, and they said, oh, no, wait, let's do this one instead.
You had to go on after Heart of Rock and Roll too in Tulsa.
Yes. It was like after Heart of Rock and Roll, if you came out and you were like, if I had time in a bottle, people would be like, boo.
Like, is there like, there must be like a, you know, because like sometimes playing a show when you know the audience hates you, there's almost like a feel good energy that kind of comes over you. Was it the same sort of thing when you know the crowd's hating it?
You know what? I was so anxious at SNL that I just was like a big people pleaser. I just wanted everybody to like everything I did, so I would kind of overthink it, and you know, the kind of crazier jokes or stuff, I would be like, maybe we don't do that, or maybe we do this. Like, what's going to get a laugh? And you know, I was just so overthought it too much. And then the longer I was there, I kind of calmed down a bit. And then by the end, I mean, Fred Armisen, I mean, it's all on YouTube. I mean, Fred Armisen and I would fuck around constantly. Yeah. Because it was our last season and we were just like, you know, it was like senior year finals. Like, you just know you're almost off the show. There's one sketch called Song for Daddy that went to dress. That one was Justin Bieber was the host, and that's when a wall almost fell on him in the middle of that sketch. And it was, the idea of the sketch was I was an old country singer, and I'm gonna sing a song about my daddy. And you know, this song, my daddy, he loved this song, and he you know, he would have loved this, and so I want to sing it to you right now. And I'm like, can you give me my new guitar? And they bring out like a 3-neck guitar. And then the joke of the sketch was, as I'm rapping about what the song's about, you see that we're all getting these really weird instruments. And you're like, wait, what is this song going to be? And then the sketch ended. So you never hear the song. And then it's revealed midway through that we're on the Steve Harvey show. That was the other thing. So that was a sketch. When I went out, the entire crowd was filled with Justin Bieber fans. It was all like 13-year-old to 18-year-old girls.
True believers.
True believers, yes. And I went out and it was like, all right, well, this is going to die. So you just kind of took your time. You know? Like, yeah, it's a Josh Brolin thing. Well, let's shut these fuckers up, you know? And we did very well.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that one went terrible. That was bad. And then what was he? There's a bunch of them, but yeah, Fred. Well, you know, the California. This is interesting. The Californians, the voices that we initially did on that sketch, or at least the voice I'm doing, was me and Fred would try to do like the Minutemen. We would try to do San Pedro guys.
Yeah.
We'd walk around going, "Hey, man, I'm from San Pedro," you know, and it was like, "Yeah, I'm from Yeah, dude, I was just down in San Pedro, man," and then we would try to do, you know, the Keith Morris, like Hermosa Beach, and, you know, we would try to do that stuff. And then it kind of, so I'm doing a weird version, like a more heightened version of like the San Pedro guy from like the Minutemen documentary in that sketch. And then he's the reason I laughed the first time we did that sketch is because he was doing the Memorial San Pedro thing, but then when we actually did the sketch, he started doing a completely different voice, and that threw me off, and I started laughing. When he went, wait, what are you? I just like, what is he doing? And it still makes me laugh.
I think, like, dealing with anxiety, like going out on stage, doing what I do and fucked up, I can't see myself doing something where I'd have to remember a script, because I just have to get lost in the moment.
Yeah.
Like, what's it like where you're dealing with that anxiety, but you're also like fucking having to stay on script and stay in a fucking character?
Yeah, no, you know what it is? You're reading cue cards, which is great, but I'm also so terrified because I'm not very good at like reading like that. I read a lot. I read a lot, but it's like I read for information and stories. But as far as like remembering words and spelling and grammar, it just goes in one ear and out the other. I just cannot remember. That's the most embarrassing thing on Barry, is that I'm at the whiteboard in the writer's room, like writing out our outlines and ideas. And, me and Alec Berg are he's on one end of the room and I'm on the other end of the room, but I'm the board guy, in the writer's room. So I'm like writing out everything, and it's really embarrassing where I'll write something and someone will be like, Bill, that's not how you spell heel.
I fucking hate Twitter for that reason.
Yeah,
so much.
Like, Bill, what did you just write? And it's like, shit, hold on, wait, is that not how you spell? Yeah, how do you spell last? No,
yeah,
but no, when you're out there and you're really anxious, it's hard. It's just a thing I wish. I mean, that's what's so great. It makes a lot of sense to me. Yourself and seeing guys like you or Henry Rollins or these guys where it's like, oh no, it's like really pent up, anxiety or nervousness, and being able to lose yourself in that kind of thing is just amazing. It must be really cathartic. Whereas like when I'm doing a sketch or something, it's you have to be very highly focused.
Yeah.
But you also, it's this weird thing is like the more you do it and the more you kind of become comfortable with your anxiety and try to find a way to use it in a way, in that cliched kind of acting term, but it's true. It's like, if you go, okay, I'm anxious, well then I'll kind of keep a lot of the characters will be like keyed up,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people go, oh, you're laughing so much during Stefan and stuff, but it's also, I'm so anxious. And when I get really anxious, I get really giggly, and a lot of that is anxiety, because I know John's made a change to the script, or I know there's like that character became such a big deal that there was a lot of pressure by the end, every time you go out, it's like, oh, it has to be a grand slam,
Yeah.
And so I would always feel a lot of pressure on me when I would go out there towards the end. I was always like, can we not do that like ever again? Because I'm going to throw up if I have to do it again, so, yeah, it is, and it's weird. It's only on live.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only time it happens for me. On a set, I'm way more relaxed, and running Barry, like writing, directing, and acting in Barry is way less nerve-wracking than performing on Saturday Night Live for me.
Well, like, and I got to see that. I read about the short film that you did that you never put out. Was it a comedy or is it like Barry? Like,
Yeah.
were you doing?
Yeah, it was like a there was a couple of those. Yeah, I came up, that's a funny thing, and it's a good thing that, like, I was in like from the age of 10, I would say I was like, I want to be a filmmaker. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, I noticed the people who direct stuff at the end of the movie, like the names at the end of the credits. Those are the people, and I'm starting to understand their styles, and I got really into movies for that reason. So I wanted to make stuff, and those were my heroes. And then this happens. You lose your confidence when you're in your 20s, and you have, whether it's a teacher or peers or whatever, going, oh, this is terrible. And if you're like insecure and don't have a lot of confidence and you're anxious all the time, you're like, well, I guess you're right. And so then you try to fight through it and you try to make something, but when you're making it, you're so hard on it because you're so terrified that people are going to, give you shit and they're going to be right,
Yeah.
And so, and also the problem about being a fan is that the mark for what a short film should be is like astronomically high. It has to be perfect, and so, I made a couple of short films and they were all like dark, funny, but dark. Number one was about it was like vampires, but not like vampires in the sense of, there was a George Romero movie called Martin.
Amazing movie. Yeah.
Yeah. About a kid who thinks he's a vampire. Mm-hmm. So it was taking that kind of concept, but it was like a kind of that with like Man Bites Dog, kind of black and white mockumentary following two guys like that around Arizona, which is where I was living at the time. So it was kind of like this black and white verite type thing of these two guys who were idiots. But there was never described why they were this way or why they were doing it. It was just, we were following these two dudes, and it was really strange. And it was one of those things, like I did it and then I showed it, to my little class, and they were like, what the fuck is this? And I remember I showed it to the girl I was dating at the time, and she was like, oh, anyway, what else? Do you want to watch Seinfeld? You know what I mean? And you're just and so I didn't finish it. I didn't pay to have I didn't have like a sound mix, or, I didn't, do any color correct. I didn't correct the picture or anything like that. And no one ever seen it.
So because that's the thing with Barry is you're just so fucking assured as a director. And it's like the first shit you directed, other than these short films, these things got to be amazing. These people were idiots.
No, I think they're pretty bad. I think what happened was between making those and directing Barry, I got a lot of confidence that, I got a ton of real world experience from PAing on sets and seeing how movies were made, to working as a production assistant. So I could see how things are edited, and living in those worlds, and just being the low guy on the totem pole forever. But loving it. And then getting Saturday Night Live, which then I was trial by fire of all right, now you're in charge of your idea, and so when you have a sketch on SNL, it's kind of like when, Chris Rock told me that. He's like, you can direct a movie because it's no different than SNL. It's you go to all the department heads, you're telling them what you want, it's your vision, and you got to just put it up. And I was like, oh yeah, and so by the time Barry rolled around, we had a meeting about, with HBO, and they said, hey, we'll do the pilot. Who do you think should direct it? And I hadn't talked about this to Alec Berg, I don't think. I just went, I'll do it. I want to do it. And they were like, huh? And I was like, I want to do it. I want to do the pilot. And they were like, okay, well, let's think about that for a second. We'll let you know. And then I guess they called Alec Berg and was like, can he do this? And Alec, he had no idea, but he was like, yeah. He's like, I'll be on set. It'll be fine. So I really have him to thank, because if he hadn't said that, you know what I mean? That was huge. And so they gave me a chance to direct the pilot, and Brandon Trost, who's a great director in his own right now, he shot it, and I just remember him going like, "Wow, you're like really prepared." And I was like, "I've been wanting to do this for, let me look, 28 years."
Yeah, like Rudy. I've been
Yeah,
prepared for
Rudy.
this my whole life.
Exactly. Yeah, I was Rudy. Like Ned Beatty was there, and John Favreau going, "Look how little he is!" Like while I'm directing. He's so little.
It feels like though that the type of movie that Barry would be if it was like a feature, like obviously a couple feature films, but like as a movie, it's like you're talking about like Man Bites Dog. Like obviously it's technically on a different level than some of these films, but like, you know, like it feels like it's part of that world, like Lahane, like just like this era of filmmaking where you could be really adventurous and be super dark and comedic and try like weird things.
Yeah, tone is the biggest thing with Barry, of just and what you just described. Yeah, because it's funny now. I watched I think Man Bites Dog was on Criterion Channel or something or someplace, and I watched it again, and again we talk about, you know, you get older, you're just like, oh my god, this is awful. You know, I could barely hang on to it. You know, I was like, I watched, I like, wait, what the fuck, this is really fucked up. You know, but you know, it is the thing. What I've learned is the tone of it, but so much of it is just the bringing yourself to it. You know what I mean? Bringing emotions that you've had, or bringing, you know, some emotional honesty to it, and learning about writing, which I basically did from just hanging out in the South Park writers' room and at Pixar. And you know, I just, being on SNL, it like kind of gave me this nice thing where I could afford going like, hey, can I just sit in while you guys write Inside Out and pitch stuff and just see how you guys work? And on South Park, I did that for like 10 years. I mean, those guys wrote the show, but you know, every once in a while I'd pitch a joke or something like that. But it was mostly just, I wouldn't be able to do Barry if I hadn't have had that experience of watching them build a story. And I went, oh, wow, it's like this real balance of logic and emotion, and how much of themselves they put into something like South Park, which some people might not think, you know, but, and it was really inspiring to me. And so in doing Barry, it was the same thing of like, taking, you know, my SNL experience to a degree, and instead of making a show about, you know, a guy who's really anxious, but he has to go on live television, you know, it was like, oh, what if it was like a hitman who wants to be an actor, you know, and you can kind of put those same emotions and feelings into it, you know, and I just feel like people, like when you're genuine in life, you know, people feel it when they're watching something too, you know, where you're being told a story. You know what I mean? And I'm sure it's the same with a song or something. You just could feel that it's genuine. Do you know what I mean? And there's no airs behind it. There's no bullshit. You're like, oh, you know, and everything from, you know, a Kurosawa movie to, you know, a Bad Brain song or Kendrick Lamar or fucking, I don't know, Taylor Swift. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's you just have like a visceral reaction to something, going like, oh, I like that, you know, because it's genuine. So you try to do that with Barry, but at the same time, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's like you were saying, you know, way back at the beginning, like there's a, like I guess we're both talking about like sort of the authenticity of a Punisher, you know, and when it's that honest, like there's no edifice, there's no like, you know, I'm going to hide behind this to reveal this later to you. Like it's just, I don't know, like there's just like an emotion that just rings true on stuff. Like, yeah, Barry, like, you know, like that's like, I, you know, what my wife's like, we got to watch this, and I'm like, you know, yeah, we'll watch it, you know, like I don't know, like we'll give it a chance, you know, and then watching it, like there's, like you're saying, there's this authenticity that just comes across in that character that I guess that's where it comes from. You're writing as yourself, obviously not as yourself, but
yeah, no, they haven't found the bodies yet, but Yeah, I've only killed a couple. No, but it is that feeling of yeah. I remember moving. When I got SNL. I mean, that show very much is like about SNL.
Mhm.
Like getting to a community, and going, gosh, I really want to fit in here, and and falling in love with the community, but then having like this feeling of I'm inadequate at this, like you know, I had I'd taken some improv classes and was performing in a backyard with my friends, and now I'm with Kristen Wiig, who's on main stage at Groundlings, and Andy Samberg, who's lazy, before Lazy Sunday. I mean, just the Boo was a big thing, and all the Lonely Island stuff, and then Sudeikis was like, I had heard about him from when he was in Second City in Chicago, and so it was this, the class that I came in with, I did have massive inferiority complex. And so, I think a lot of that feeling is in Barry in places, just wanting to fit in and just hold on to this, going, God, please. Like my first 4 years in SNL, you're just like, please don't fire me, just please don't fire me, and and so yeah, so it is interesting to be able to do it that way, and then, but I don't know if you have this with music too, and it's funny because it's like I'm telling you all this stuff, but I didn't realize this stuff really until we were done with the first season of the show. Like we're in, like it's airing. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of like SNL. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, oh, now I know where this is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, holy shit, wow, how did I not see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, there's an honesty you can have when you're writing in a character. Like, anytime that I'm not writing as myself, I feel like it could be, I talk about shit that I would never want to talk about,
Yeah.
as me.
Yeah. I don't want to kill anybody, just so you know, and I'm not into like that stuff. It's more wanting to belong.
No, I definitely never got that.
Yeah, it's like people pleasing. It's like a guy who's like a, people pleaser, and it's funny that he's like this killer. So instead of like making a show about, me as like this, people pleaser or whatever, it's like, oh no, what if he was like the worst killer in the world, but it was me, and that would get a laugh from people. Like, I'm not going to play a character. It's going to be a version of me. Like kind of weird, like awkward guy, giggly, awkward guy. And Alec Berg, I have to say, I mean, he co-created the show. And so what I'm doing, Barry, is like kind of a combination of both of us,
Mm-hmm. So he's the killer. He's the murderer.
He's the killer. No, yeah, but Alec is very kind of like reserved, and thoughtful, where I'm more of a spaz. And I think just inherently when I was doing the like, I didn't even think about how I was going to play him until the very first day of shooting, because I was so anxious about directing. And then it was like, oh, right, I have to play a part, and then just instinct, because I've been hanging out with Alex so much, just kind of made him quiet. I was just like, let's cut all these lines and just make him kind of like listen. You just don't know what is happening. And we tried that. And Alec, of course, he's like, I love that. He's like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I really like that. No, it was good.
I've kept you forever. I should apologize.
No, this is awesome. Are you kidding? No, I'm having a blast.
This has been incredible, and I could talk to you forever. But like, at some point, would you come back for a part 2?
Yeah. Are you kidding?
Okay.
Yeah, sure,
because I promise I won't keep you too much longer. But like,
I didn't realize it's it's like midnight there, right?
Yeah, I don't sleep anymore now because the kids get up at 5 a.m, and I got to do the homeschool thing until nighttime. So I just basically work at night now. So I'm
okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, it's only 8:45 here, so.
No, I promise I won't keep you too much longer. But
no, I'm fine.
You've had like the like my dream career, like obviously the addition of Saturday Night Live and Barry and stuff like that. But I mean, just like doing, like you were saying, the opportunities that are afforded to you where you just go around and you just start doing shit like you're on Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're a voice consultant for BB-8.
Yeah. Well, that was, I gotta say, BB-8 was very much, I did a voice for BB-8. So I think, I don't know the full events, how it happened, but I know Ben Schwartz did something. And then when I was brought in, it was like, do you want to try something? Like he was actually saying stuff. And then they brought me in to just make noises. So I did this noise thing and just did like ADR watching the movie and just doing all these noises. And like Gary Rystrom was there. So I was kind of just freaking out because the sound mixer is Gary Rystrom, who did like just everything cool. Like Saving Private Ryan. He did that opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan. Like he's a genius. So I was like, holy shit, it's Gary Rystrom. And he was really cool. And then I didn't hear anything. And then I'm seeing like billboards for it up and everything. So I'm like, well, I guess it's, they didn't use my thing or whatever, And then JJ calls me. He's like, hey, can you come in? I'm thinking, oh, they're going to ask me to do some more stuff. And I came in, they go, yeah, that thing you did, it doesn't work. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, but we figured it out. It's you got to talk into a tube, like the talk box, Peter Frampton talk box.
Yeah.
And that's hooked up to an iPad. So what you're hearing is me talking into a talk box and just going wah, 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 like that. And he's manipulating it on this weird app that he just found on an iPad that makes noises, like a weird percussion app.
Yeah.
And literally anybody can do it. So the fact that he gave me a credit was him just being like, oh, I'm going to be, like, hey, here you go, man. It was like, he was just being nice,
Yeah, but now
one fanboy to another kind of thing.
Yeah, but now you're set for life. You can just do Star Wars conventions forever.
Yeah,
as the voice of BB-8.
Yeah, just sitting there, just like smoking, like big beer gut. Like, what is it? Who is this? To Nick. Wow, wow.
Do it into my phone. Do it into my phone.
Yeah, just hanging out with like all the fucking Jawas and stuff, and just going to like strip clubs. It's like, yeah, no, this is cool. Yeah.
The convention circuit, though, once you get on that thing, that's a gravy train.
Oh, man, it is a gravy train. That's true. I'm giving it shit, but actually those guys make so much fucking money. And it's actually, I've gone to those things and it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I brought my kid to
awesome.
one. It's so fun.
Awesome. It's so much fun. I'm giving it shit, but actually it's like one of the coolest things ever. And I'm like, I would fully go to one of those things.
Yeah. I imagine, though, it'd be like working at the carnival. Like after the first couple days, it becomes just work.
Yeah, I mean, I've done the Comic-Con thing, like for it too, and some other things where you go there and you sign stuff, and after a while, it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
What's
your favorite horror movie? Like, you don't have to be like, I don't pick an all-time favorite thing, but what are some of your favorites?
Horror films, man. Okay, so I mean, the Evil Dead, the Sam Raimi Evil Dead, had a massive influence on me. Huge. When I saw that movie, the next day I picked up my dad's video camera and started, chasing my sisters around, going, wow, wow, and all that stuff. And actually like a very amazing, virtuosic movie. But the reason I love it so much, like a punk record, you could tell it's a bunch of 19-year-olds out in the woods of Tennessee who are just figuring it out as they go along and just have tons of, like, there's Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and Rob Tappert and Tim Sullivan. All these guys are just like super excited, and the story that they shot it. And then the actors were all like, we got to go back to college. And so everybody left, and it got down to where it was like 3 dudes in a cabin with Bruce Campbell making him do all these things for months and months and months, because they were just like, we want to get this right. And then that the assistant editor was Joel Cohen of the Coen brothers. And like, it's so cool to me, that all these things that I grew up loving are kind of in one thing. And then the crazy thing to cap it off is that Jessie Hodges, who is in Barry, she plays Sally's agent in season 2. her mom is Ellen Sandweiss in Evil Dead.
Whoa.
So she was like, oh, my mom was in this movie, The Evil Dead. And I'm like, is she Ellen Sandweiss? And she's like, yes. I'm like, one, that seems awful. And I'm sorry, she had to shoot that. And she started laughing. I go, but two, I had a fucking poster of her on my wall from like the age of like, because she's the woman, I think that's her coming out of the, out of the ground,
the ground. That's right.
Yeah. And I'm like, I've never met her, but I'm like, if I met your mom, I would just shut down, because I just think she's so good in that movie, and she's the best zombie in the movie. And I don't know, that movie had a huge influence on me. And also, it's funny that Joel Cohen was the assistant editor on it, because if you watch Blood Simple, there's sound effects. You could tell they're using the same sound effects library, because they're using a lot of the same sound effects. So the same dog bark, there's a fly noise, there's like all these things where you're like, that's the same can, they're using the same shit. They're recycling the sound effects from Evil Dead. That's rad, so that one was massive. And then I won't go into detail, but on the other ones, but as much, but it's like The Haunting, Robert Wise one, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and Martin, John Carpenter's The Thing, and I would say I'm probably missing a massive one in there, and this is the problem with this, is like, yeah, I'll be in bed tonight, I'll go, oh my god.
Well, that's why I didn't ask for the definitive list.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely.
So those would be like off the top of my head, just the ones that had a big influence on me that I would, and to be honest, any sort of B grade monster movie. I love Hammer Gothic horror films. I just kind of went on a tear of those like about a month ago, because it's pandemic. So I was like, I'm just gonna get all those old Hammer Blu-rays I have and sit and watch those, and they're great.
You kept all your Blu-rays?
Oh yeah, man, I have everything.
Oh, Blu-ray. Sorry, I was thinking Laserdisc for some reason.
Oh, Laserdisc. I just said old Blu-rays. I should have said Laserdisc, because Blu-rays are new. So I think I shouldn't have used old. I think in my head I was thinking old movies.
Yeah.
I got all my old movies on Blu-rays is what it should have. Probably should have said that. I'm
the one who went to the oldest technology, the most arcane technology for film, home view possible.
No, I never had Laserdisc. I remember my friend who I was into punk with, a guy named Clint. His aunt had a roommate, and that guy had like this giant Laserdisc collection. And I remember I watched Night of the Living Dead there for the first time, and a movie called Liquid Sky.
Oh yeah,
which is very strange, kind of like woman, like it's like a alien, like total new wave kind of movie, and it's like an alien who kills people with orgasms or gets strength from humans' orgasms, but she's like, it was so early 80s, and it's a German movie, but it was shot all in New York. And I remember watching that, just being like, what the fuck is this? This is great.
And there's got to be like a huge collectible market for those old like Criterion Laserdiscs that were coming out.
Oh, yeah. And it's hard too. Like I was just watching this, the Criterion Channel, was watching this great Japanese noir movie called Youth of the Beast. I think is what it's called. And I was like, oh, is this available on disc? Because I'm one of those people, I do the same thing with music now, where it's like streaming's great and everything, but I'm so anxious that it's going to go away. I want to like have a hard copy of it. So it's like, I get really freaked out and go like, well, I need to track this down. It had an old Criterion disc, and it was like Laserdisc. I was like, whoa, that's kind of rad. I don't have a Laserdisc player, but I kind of just want to own that, But
I wonder if they're going to become like records. Like it's like, because you get the art bigger, everything about it.
Yeah, and some Blu-rays try to, like, I just got that Criterion Bruce Lee collection, and it came with like a big poster like they try to do some of that, I feel like, and with some of the, especially Criterion and places like that, where they try to make the art really cool, and they do. I mean, it's really, I love that company. I feel like I'm just, all my money just goes to them.
Have you ever read the Creation Books cinema series that they did? Like they did one on they did one on cinema of transgression. They did one on feminist films.
No. What are they called?
It's I guess it's Creation Cinema Series was the name of the series, but like the one to get is Killing for Culture, which is all about, you know, death movies, and it's a fascinating book and very well written, and just sort of you know, really analyzes films that no one ever analyzes like that, like from an actual cinema studies kind of perspective.
That's cool. No, I love stuff like that. I mean, it's a sickness. It just is. It's like I'm constantly, same thing with music too. It's like if I find out any sort of band documentary or music documentary or book, like any oral history on a band, even if I'm not into them, I'm like, I eat that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Love it so much. I really
totally
like that Joy Division oral history book. I thought was cool.
I loved it. It's funny because, like, not that it's a documentary, but like as far as music films go, I think 24 Hour Party People is like my favorite, one of my favorite films ever, but certainly one of my favorite music movies.
How good is that guy as Ian Curtis?
So good. I wish he was in Control.
I know he was. I mean, the guy in Control is like good, but like that guy was like, I was like, how the fuck? That guy was amazing. I just remember the first time I saw him, I was like, what? How is that, like, people not just losing their minds over this guy's portrayal of Ian Curtis? Like, he was phenomenal.
And I don't know if it's on the audio commentary or if it was something I read in like Uncut magazine when it came out, but like apparently he had like a super severe case of pneumonia while they were filming.
Oh, wow.
And so like a lot of his acting is the fact that he's also like, feverish or just coming off pneumonia or something like that. Like he was just sort of dealing with illness while they were making it.
And then the crazy thing, he was in that last Mission Impossible movie.
Whoa, I gotta watch that.
He's the guy in the last Mission Impossible movie that they try to like he's going to jail or something, and they try to spring him from like an armored car, and it turns into this giant chase. I want to say through France or someplace. I don't remember. But
that's this list that I'm coming up with right now.
yeah, it was just like he was in a really good movie, that actor. Well, the guy who directed The Nest, which is a movie that just came out, Sean Durkin. He directed a movie called Southcliff.
Oh, whoa, I haven't seen that.
That guy is in it. And Sean Harris is the guy we're talking about. But Sean Harris, it looks like he's in a couple of Mission Impossible movies, but he's in this thing called Southcliff that's like very, very it's about a mass shooting thing, but it's incredibly well done. It's very disturbing, but it's really, really well done, where it takes a subject like that and it takes out all the kind of action motifs of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's the thing with Barry, is like to keep because I remember watching Southcliff and talking to our DP about it and some other people, and it was just like, God, if you went this direction with the violence in Barry, it's just really disturbing, and I just don't think we can go that way, because it's so real. And I was like, God, I really appreciate it though. And so we're always dialing things back, it's just like anything, like you go too far and then you get an edit and you go, you know what, we're going to have to, we're going to have to kind of lighten this a bit, or just not use that footage or this footage or whatever, you're always trying to find that equal, that balance. Hiro Murai, that director, who's a genius, he directed some of our episodes, and he's so good at that. He finds just the right amount of violence. He did the stash house sequence in episode 5 of season 1, where me and that guy Taylor just take out that stash house, and he did such a good job portraying the violence in that it just wasn't, it's just trying to find a way to make it less actiony. And then, even in something like that Ronnie Lilly episode we did, which was crazy, it was still like you're trying to find a way of like, okay, how, it comes down to even like, oh, no music, and then that gives it something, or like we have a big one shot in that, and the DP was like, what if you just let them cross in and out of frame, because we were feeling like, oh, this feels kind of show offy. And it's like, well, if you have them cross in and out of frame, and the camera's always like a couple beats behind them, it might give it a right feel. And it did. It kind of makes it more like if the camera's like judging them, like, what are you doing? Like, I don't want to watch this, and this is good. Yeah. And it's like, you're always trying to find that feel to things. But I thought South Cliff, that Sean Durkin movie, he really did it in that one. If you could find it, I was really knocked out by it. Actually, I'm calling it a movie. I think it's a series, like a Channel 4 series.
Oh, like a mini series type thing, or like an ongoing?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think it was like it might have been based on a true story, but just viewer discretion. It's very disturbing, but incredibly well done, I thought.
I'll have to balance it out with something super, super light. But that sounds like something I should check out. But
what helps me is my kids and Disney Plus. They have all the old Simpsons on there, so I've just been tearing through the old Simpsons.
Yep,
and just that's my like old Simpsons, or if I can find like that Saints documentary, or something like that. You're just like, oh, okay, this balances out like mass shooting thing I just watched, or whatever.
Have you seen that the show on it's like a British show as well, that's about people that just create things to help people? Like it's a documentary series, and every episode they'll like, help a guy who lost his ability to speak. They'll create an app for him so he can talk to his kids again, but using like samples of his voice from videos that they found or something. Like it's just
wow.
And every episode, it's like the ultimate palate cleanser after you watch something really violent. Because
oh my god, it sounds like I'll be bawling after I watch something like that. That's really sweet.
It's really sweet, but in like a way that everyone's life is slightly improved by the end of the show, and you're like, oh, okay, I can.
Okay, no one died. Yeah, all right, good.
That's okay.
No one's sad.
But like,
it is the opposite of what I just watched. Okay, good.
But that's the thing about that Ronnie and Lily episode. The tone, like you're saying, that tone in that episode is just so perfect. Because like watching that as a parent, it's like, where the fuck is this gonna go? Like,
yeah, that's where you wanted to just ride that. I love that moment where he's leaving and she's walking in, because I feel like the audience goes, oh no.
Yeah.
And then you just don't expect that she's like this, whatever, Pharaoh Mongoose or whatever, Steven calls her. Or I don't know, someone calls her that. But it's that was a fun one to make. That was really a blast. And that was like, also is just nice to just not have to, just for a change of pace, to not be like, we're always so worried that the story is being handled right. Mm-hmm. It's like each scene has like information that is very important that down the line is going to come back or be referred to. So you're always, while you're doing scenes, sometimes I have to be very, aware that sometimes I can be doing a scene with Stephen Root, but I'm like mouthing his words along, going like, is that the right line? Is that how we should do it? Stephen's like, Bill, stop it. You're mouthing along with my lines. I'm like, I just don't think that's the right line. I'm like, is that what he should say here? You know what I mean? And it's like, so it was nice to do an episode that was just insanity and you didn't have to worry about that too much. And, it was just a lot of fun. and you get to like try stuff, is like getting to try like wire work, and there's so much CG in that episode that you don't know about, and like hiding stuff and speeding things up, and there's all types of stuff in that is really cool. Like,
it feels like an episode like that would require it did like a lot of trust from the audience. Like, it's something like you couldn't have done that in the first season, because it's like,
no, yeah, you kind of want people to feel like, oh, I get this and I'm comfortable, and then you want to take the rug out from under them.
Yeah.
And we're writing we just finished writing season 3. We're doing a big rewrite of season 3, and now we're writing season 4, and you have those things, where it's kind of like you just want to make sure that whether it is an episode like that or a tone or something a character does or just something, it feels good that things are changing, but like we were saying earlier, it's like I can't, words and stuff they don't stick in my brain at all. Like I'm always like like those British people, or like someone like Nick Cave or whatever, they just love words, like they just come from a very literate community. I just feel like very stupid anytime I'm around anybody from outside of the United States.
Well, not us in Canada. We're just like your little brothers, so don't worry.
No, that's not true. That's not true. It's like, but and I just don't have that. But I love telling a story like that. You know what I mean? And that's one where you write it, and instead of the usual process of writing a script, that was one that I went into the writer's room and I just told it to them like beat for beat. And they came up with stuff that was really helpful. Like Tal Clade, one of our writers, initially the opening that I had was Barry breaking into the house and hiding. And then the whole thing was him in his closet and hearing the guy, him in the closet and hearing the guy come in and all this stuff. And then Tal was like, no, you should take it from Ronnie's point of view. And that was so much better. And in that discussion, the idea of Fuchs gluing his hands to the steering wheel came out of that, just bullshitting and going like, okay, but I want her to bite his face, but why doesn't he just pull her off of his face, And then we were just talking, it was like, oh, what? Maybe he glues himself? Well, how would he do that? And it's like, what if he had super glue and he tries to super glue his wound? Oh, okay, it's like a fun puzzle that you work backwards from it, that him gluing his hands to the steering wheel solely came from, I wanted her to bite his face. And Alec went, why wouldn't he just pull her off her face? Pull her off his face,
Yeah.
And yeah. So, you have stuff like that, or, the last episode of the season 2 where Barry has a big shootout in the monastery. Like when we were shooting the exteriors, it started raining and we had to shoot, and I was just bummed about it. I was like, man, it's raining, and God, well, I hope it keeps raining. And then you have we have to bring out rain towers for the other, but luckily it just kept raining. And then Kyle Ryder, our editor, put rain over all the interiors scenes in it. He's like, well, it's raining. And he put rain in it, and suddenly the whole thing came to life in a really cool, eerie way. And it was totally by accident, And that's my favorite part of this process, is when you just something like that happens. Or Sarah Goldberg, fellow Canadian who plays Sally, she can rattle off, we had a scene that Alec and I had written with the two of us that just didn't really, it was fine, but it was kind of just flat. And then I was like, Sarah has the ability to like talk incredibly fast, and she can remember a lot of dialogue. What if we just took all this information and just put it, like, have Sally say it all, in one long, like 3-page rant. And I think I texted her saying, hey, would you ever want to, I think we were going to give you a scene. It's like 3 pages and you just like no punctuation. And she was like, oh, yes, please. And I mean, it's a showstopper, you know what I mean? I mean, she just kills it. But you know, that's what's so fun about this process. Those are the moments that I'm just like, oh God, I love doing this. This is just, it's like that for me was a you know, a great going back to like you're 10 years old and you're watching movies and stuff, and you know.
Well,
getting to do that.
this has been the best, Bill. Like, this has been unbelievable, and I have like literally 2 more questions. I've kept you.
Oh no, dude, no, go ahead. No, don't worry about it, man.
I really have kept you for. This might be the longest episode ever.
We don't have to do the whole episode. Maybe you can split it up into 2 parts.
No way. Are you kidding? Like, this is a Robbie Brookside might top us, but I think we might. I still have 2 more questions, so Robbie Brookside might lose his title. One thing I was wondering about that you kind of keep mentioning is like SCTV and Kids in the Hall. Like, was that stuff shown on TV? Like kids, especially SCTV.
Oh yeah. SCTV. My memory of SCTV as a kid was the reruns of it would be on after Saturday Night Live. So you would watch Saturday Night Live, and then you would at 1 a.m, SCTV would start, you know. But I was obsessed with SCTV. I just was fully obsessed with it. And then when it came out on DVD, like in 2004, I was obsessed with those DVDs. You know, I've watched all of them, and then getting to meet a lot of those people and asking them questions, and you know, just being such a fan. And I had an amazing moment where I got to go to Martin Short has a Christmas party most years, and I went to his Christmas party, and pretty much everybody from SCTV was there. And so I'm over in a corner. I was just like, there's Dave Thomas and Catherine O'Hara and Andrea Martin and, you know, Eugene Levy and Paul Flaherty. I mean, I was just like, what the I just was like, my head's going to explode. So yeah, I was a massive SCTV fan, and massive Kids in the Hall fan. Huge. Like, I would tape them off television, you know, would stay up late and tape them all, and knew some of the bits by heart. And like I said, like when I met, the only Kid in the Hall I've met is Kevin McDonald. And so, but I was so, I mean, yeah, I was just trying to be, I couldn't, again, I was punishing him. I just could not, I could not keep it together around him. And I was like, who came up with the Citizen Kane sketch? You know, I go, to this day, I can't say Citizen Kane without going, Citizen Kane, you know.
I like growing up in Toronto, like they were around, like, so you'd see them and it was like giants walking the earth, right? Like, and
oh my God,
just like, you know, having weird run-ins with, you know, Kevin McDonald walking home from school one day, and I see him on the street and I just stare at him and he's just staring at me, and then breaks into a full sprint. Like, just it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Or
like, get away from me.
Yeah, like this. I think he was messing with me in a fun way, but it was still like, if he was serious, he would great comedy with the seriousness there. Or like, you know, Dave Foley. I'll edit this part up. But trying to buy E off me. I didn't sell E, but at a party one time. It's amazing how, like that show is just so good, and these people are just like around.
And then they're all on. My kids watch show called Odd Squad.
Yes.
And they're on it. And there's one episode that was like a mystery, like a, you know, like this, like kind of Agatha Christie mystery thing. And the whole group was in it. And I got to tell my daughters, I was like, that's the Kids in the Hall. I'm sure most of them were in it. Maybe Bruce McCullough wasn't in it. But I know it was Mark McKen and Scott Thompson and Kevin McDonald were for sure in it. And I feel like Dave Foley was in it. But I was like, guys, when you're older, I can show you some of this stuff. It's like some of my favorite comedy of all time was from these guys. And I mean, and also, I mean, the fact that I think their order of episodes was so high that they just had to fill it with material. And so then you just had these really bizarre sketches that didn't really go, you know, they weren't I think it kind of pushed the form in a way that I thought was different, you know. Thinking specifically, do you remember where Bruce McCullough is having a heart attack?
Yeah.
He's like the businessman where he's like super, and it just keeps cutting to him looking at that painting, and he's like, and he's giving aphorisms to himself. Where he's like, today I will look people in the eye or whatever, and then he ends up pulling his heart out of his body and then pouring coffee on it.
Yeah,
and you're just like, what is this, you know? And there's one where Dave Foley, he's like trying not to eat this giant chocolate bar. Do you remember that?
that one's incredible.
Yeah, and he ends up pouring all this like Ajax on it, and he goes out in the woods and he closes his eyes and he runs around in circles and he throws it. And then he goes back out to find it. Well, I remember the one that made me laugh the hardest, and it's so dark, was the one where Mark McKinney's the politician at the jam tasting contest.
I don't know if I remember. I got to rewatch that one. I don't know if I remember that.
Scott Thompson is his. Scott Thompson's the his Secret Service guy.
Okay.
And there's all these jams there, and it's at a nice, pleasant, like fair jam tasting contest or something. And Mark McKinney's like doing that great politician, Canadian politician. He's like, wow, that was really great. But if I have to say, all the jams were quite good. But if I had to pick one, I guess number 8 would be, had a specific tinge to it. And everybody goes, and they go, what? And they go, that jam was made by a child molester. And you see in the back Kevin McDonald in prison like garb, handcuffed, flanked by 2 cops, and he's like, hey, I won. and Mark McKinney's like, what the fuck is that guy doing here? And it ends up ruining his entire political career because they let a child molester enter the jam making contest.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God, that was so ballsy. Like, I just was like, that could have really gone a bad way, but it was so stupid. And the joke wasn't like about molesting kids or whatever. It was about like a horrible person had made a jam that a politician made.
Yeah.
Just the dumb luck of a politician. It just taught me a thing about where to put the joke. You could put something edgy in it, but the edgy thing, you know, you can't make that thing the comedy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It has to have like the edgy thing, awful thing has to be awful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what elicits the laugh, you know? And I learned that at South Park a lot too. So it's like, and I think that's where so much of comedy goes wrong, especially people trying to be funny on Twitter and stuff and getting themselves in trouble. You're like, no.
Yeah.
Like, racism is bad.
Yeah.
Child molestation is bad.
Yeah.
You're not a comedy writer. Like, stay out of this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's hard. But when they found that thing, I just was like, oh my God, that was so funny.
One of the greatest things ever on Canadian television is Much Music. When Bruce McCullough put out his record, gave him a night. Just were like, okay, just program a night of TV. So he performed songs. He did, you know, other comedy bits. Like, it was just amazing because it was like, yeah. And that's something that unfortunately I think is lost in the sands of time, but I would love to watch that again.
Wow. Man, I would love to. I mean, that other sketch he does where he's like, I love this car. And the car is falling asleep. The car is falling apart.
Yeah.
And then he looks in the rearview mirror and he puts his hands through his hair and all that hair comes off. He's losing all his hair. And he's just trying to be really positive, but like the hood of the car flips up and then he's like, I love the sports score. He's just trying to be so positive, but his whole life's going to shit. Oh my God, it's so funny.
It's so funny because him and Scott Thompson are both punk rockers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Scott was on the show one time, but I interviewed Bruce when I was filling in on Q, like this radio show here.
Oh yeah.
And he was on, and he told me he got stabbed at a Dead Kennedys show when he was a kid.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
I know. I've been trying to get him to
That's
come on the podcast ever since.
What? That's like two of my like pop culture like
Yes.
benchmarks like stabbing each other. It's like two of the biggest pop culture things in my life. Kids in the Hall of Dead Kennedys.
Well, the last thing I'm going to ask you about, and this might not be true because I read it on Wikipedia, so this is probably bullshit. But were you an assistant editor on one of the biggest pop culture things in my life, Iron Chef America?
Yeah.
Whoa! Like that first run of episodes, or
I don't know what season it was, to be honest. But I worked on Iron Chef America. That's the job I had when I found out I got Saturday Night Live. I actually was in my edit bay. And my job as the assistant editor was I showed up at 5 p.m. and I stayed all night digitizing footage and prepping all the projects. So when the editors came in the morning, it was all ready to go for them to edit.
Oh man, because the original.
So,
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. No, I was just saying, like, it was Bobby Flay, Mario Batali. They were on the show. Mm-hmm. I had footage one time of Bobby Flay electrocuting himself. That was awesome. And that was actually my very first pitch at SNL. Was my very first show was hosted by Steve Carell. And I said, I have an idea where you're Bobby Flay on Iron Chef and you electrocute yourself. And then my last pitch at SNL was I said that to Ben Affleck. I was like, you're Bobby Flay and you electrocute. So it was like my own little, like, that was my first pitch.
And a bookend to it.
I did a little bookend to it, but I fucked it up because I announced that it was my first pitch and to get like, an awe, and no one gave a shit. Because they're like, fuck you, you're leaving, asshole.
Did you ever watch the Japanese series?
No, I never did, but I just remember I just remember Bobby Flay was really intense, and then he electrocuted himself, and it was pretty funny. I mean, he was fine, and it wasn't terrible, but he grabbed onto a ladle and was like, ah. But man, I don't remember. There was because I also did a show called Napa Style with a guy named Michael Chiarello. And that was also, it was just like me watching footage of like close-ups of like wine being poured and like close-ups of food. And like so much Iron Chef America was just like, all the ISO reels. So it's like, I don't know how many cameras they shot with, but it was like 6 cameras and each of them just had these massive, it wasn't 3, it was digital. I can't forget what we called them. It was like digibeta type, they were huge. It was like 3/4 inch, like big tapes. And that was just my whole world was organizing that shit and listening to like punk music, like listening to music all night. I mean, that was where I would go to like Amoeba and buy a bunch of CDs and just put those on and just, listen to those because it was a really boring job and I was there all night. And it was really creepy.
I think you dig the Japanese run of that show too, because they have like these very subtle storylines, and it ends like the last season. Bobby Flay shows up and wins, and jumps. He jumps up on his cutting board on like the prep counter, and you would have thought he like took a shit. Like everyone is just so pissed. It's so awesome.
Yeah, he was like really competitive, like from what I remember. Yeah. He seemed very competitive.
He also, that's where like when I went to that Saturday Night Live party, it was at his bar, and he was, I think, Bar America or something.
You went to SNL.
It was the one that Arcade Fire had the movie that Eric Wareheim directed afterwards.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was in that.
Yeah.
I'm in that with Zach Galifianakis. We're the Yeah, it was for Reflector.
Yes, absolutely. And
okay, so that's right after I left the show. That's the first season after I left the show.
Yeah, we were like, because they were playing and Fucked Up played a show that same night in New York, and Owen, who plays violin for them and also plays violin for us, he was like, yeah, he's like, I can't get you on to Saturday Night Live. And we're like, okay, we were bummed out, but he's like, but I can get you to the after party. And we're like, okay, sign us up. Punishment commence.
Yes. Now, who did you punish that night?
Eric Wareheim about being an Ink and Dagger. Definitely. And then I ended up sitting at a table with Paul Rudd talking about Minor Threat.
Oh, Paul's one of my best friends. Yeah, he is a music fanatic. He's a guy that can just, and like everybody, I think I gave him Apostrophe by Frank Zappa, and he went, Bill, it's not my thing. I think I also gave it to Tim Kingsbury from Arcade Fire, and Tim went, yeah, no, I listened to it. Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, it's really. And I go, really? I go, I love those. Really? I grew up on that. And he was like, nah, man, it's pretty bad. Anyway.
Oh, well, I'm going to go.
For doing a Canadian accent to you, I apologize.
No, that is not, believe me.
That's annoying. I'm doing an impression of him, and then I'm in my head going like, dude, you're doing a Canadian accent.
Yeah, but they're from Ottawa. I'm from Toronto. Toronto's like America Junior.
Right. They are from.
They're like Icks from the Sticks.
Yeah, that was like Jeremy. I was in Montreal once at the Montreal Comedy Festival with Jeremy Garrett, and I laugh about this all the time where he and I were talking, and this guy came over and he was like, hey, man. And they talked for a bit and walked away. And he goes, do you know who that was? And I go, no. And he goes, that was Bon Iver. The way he said Bon Iver. And I just think about that all the time. That was Bon Iver. And I fucking lost my mind. And literally, dude, I'll be just driving and I'll be like, that was Bon Iver. And I just start laughing. Jeremy Garrett, which you know him as well. He was a guest on the show. He's one of my favorite humans on the planet.
One of the best people ever. Yeah.
One of the best guys of all time. Yeah. And I really like, he makes these really interesting noise records, and like he sends me, I love it. And like he's such a great guy. He lives in Australia now, I think.
Oh, that's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah. And he's like, and then when we did Test Pattern we did the documentary now, Talking Heads band. He filled in on drums for John Wurster, and he's just the nicest human being on the planet, and just awesome. The other thing when I do impression of him is like, he's like, do you like Jesus Lizard? Yeah, heavy.
It's so gnarly to think about, like these shows that were to happen in Ottawa in the early 90s that would have had no more than 30 people, yet here's members of the Arcade Fire and the people that started Vice in this room.
Yes.
Like, who would have thought?
Yeah, man. I love all that stuff. He's just the best guy in the world.
The best dude. This has been, honestly, Bill, the fucking best. Anytime
you yeah, man, I love it. Yeah, I won't keep you as long. This has been so much fun, man.
No, and believe me, I don't want to keep you as long, because I could keep going forever. But yeah, anytime you want to come back, please know you're always welcome.
Thanks, pal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill, for coming on the show. And holy fuck, finding out that Bill Hader listens to Turned Out a Punk. It puts a little pressure on this thing. I do this thing and I pretend that no one listens to it. And then you find out that people are out there that you had no idea were listening. It's oh man, okay. People are out there. There's stakes at this, stakes with this thing. No, but seriously, thank you to Bill for coming on the show. That was, that's why you do this podcast, because you get to meet people that you enjoy the work of. And then you find out that, there's a commonality, and hopefully that helped you. If you're someone who suffered with anxiety, or suffers with anxiety, I should say. Hopefully hearing, Bill Hader talk about being on SNL, dealing with that stuff, resonates with you, because it definitely resonated with me, as someone who deals with anxiety, just to hear, I don't know, just hearing about others' experiences with it, I find helpful. All right. Well, Bill will definitely be back for a part 2. There's already some fun stuff in the works for the future. Okay. That is it. Oh man, I'm excited. Let's keep the good times rolling. Let's keep them. Let's keep it going. Next week on the show, or next episode on the show, coming up in a few days at the end of this week. This is another very, very, very funny person. One of my favorite, I guess I don't want to say young and up and coming comedians because that seems very patronizing, but one of my favorite comedians right now, Chappelle Lacey, will be on the show. Chappelle Lacey has an incredible podcast, is a very, very funny person, and a deep, deep punk hardcore head. We go places that I never thought I'd go to with anyone when talking about punk rock. There are certain bands that I just resigned myself at this point. We're probably never going to come up on the show, and here we are chatting about them. This is a good one. Okay, that's it. Thank you to John Wurster for making this happen. Thank you to Tristan for busting your butt for this thing, and thank you to my new buddy, Bill Hader. This was super fun. Remember, as always, Black Lives Matter. The lives of Indigenous people matter. We need to protect trans kids, and we need to protect trans people. We need to help trans people protect themselves, I should say. So go out there and get informed. Read about people's experiences. Read about what people are going through. Show up at demonstrations. Show up at events. Let your voice be heard. Lend your voice in support of people. Donate money if you can to organizations and causes that need it. And basically just fuck fascism. That's basically what it comes down to. Let everyone just live their lives and enjoy their lives as much as possible. Like, we don't need to, fuck Nazis. Just why do we make it more difficult than it has to be? Also, go there and sign your organ donor cards, because by the time they come looking for those organs, you're not going to need them. So they're just literally dead weight at that point. So just sign that card and help someone else. Go do something creative, because it helps. It can really help your mental health, and you don't have to show anyone, but if you do, maybe it'll connect with other people, and then who knows what happens. Like, I thought I was doing this podcast really for myself when I started it. I was like, okay, maybe there'll be some people interested in this thing, but this is something that I've been interested in my whole life. And here we are 5 years later, and I'm making friends because of it. God, who would have thought that? Who would have thought that? Not me. And wear a mask, and protect each other. And I love you. And I'll see you next episode. Huge shout out to my buddy Buddha Blaze. Check out Oil and Flowers. We talk about cannabis. That's it. Bye.